I stood frozen in the old kitchen, my fingers clutching the granite countertop. If I let go, I might collapse. Not because of my age, not because I was tired, but because of what my daughter, my only child, the one I once loved more than my own breath, just said. Mom, sell the wedding necklace. We need the down payment, please. Dad's gone. You don't need it anymore. She said it like she was asking me to toss an old piece of junk in the trash. Like 30 years of memory were nothing but some outdated accessory that could be traded in for her version of a dream. Claire. She used to tug on my skirt at the grocery store and whisper, Mom, don't ever leave me. Now, she's the one who shut the door on me. No screaming, no drama, just silence, cold, and legal. Welcome to Sarah Stories, where I tell the kind of truths no one dares say out loud. If you're listening to this, buckle up. Because this isn't just the story of one mother getting hurt, it's the story of so many who've been quietly erased inside their own homes. You think it all started with the necklace? No. That was just the final spark. The truth is, I stopped being mom in my daughter's eyes a long time ago. I became resourceful. I became the solution. A live-in bank account who could cook, babysit, and stay quiet when hurt. And the moment I realized that, something in me died. But then I did something no one expected. I didn't sell the necklace. I sold the house. The house where Claire grew up. The one with pencil marks still carved into the hallway wall, measuring her height when she was 6, 9, 11. I sold all the memories everyone assumed I'd cling to until the day I died. And with that money, I did the bravest thing I've ever done. I bought myself back. So if you've ever been used, forgotten, or treated like a burden, keep listening. Because what I did after that changed everything. Don't forget to subscribe to Sarah Stories so I can keep sharing real stories about real people, just like you and me. My name is Eleanor Jennings. I'm 68 years old, and I live alone in a small house on the outskirts of Savannah, Georgia, the home my late husband Harold and I bought when our daughter Claire was just 5. Back then, the house was falling apart. The paint peeled, the floorboards creaked, and the roof leaked whenever it rained. But we didn't care. We were young, full of hope, and far too stubborn to rent. Harold served 24 years in the Navy. He spent more time at sea than on land. He missed holidays, anniversaries, even Claire's birth. But when he was home, he was all in. He mowed the lawn, fixed the porch swing, and one summer afternoon he carved our initials into the oak tree next to the mailbox. That tree is still there, taller, more gnarled, but still ours. Harold passed away 12 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. It was fast, cruel, and left a silence in the house that even the ticking of the grandfather clock couldn't fill. I made myself a promise: I wouldn't sell the house. Not ever. Because it wasn't just wood and bricks. It held our memories. The laughter over Sunday breakfasts, skinned knees on the front steps, the faint scent of his cologne still lingering in the closet. And then there was the necklace. The wedding necklace. A delicate strand of pearls Harold had custom made for me in Okinawa during one of his deployments. I've only worn it twice since he passed. Once on what would have been our 40th anniversary, and once at Claire's wedding. Claire, my only child, she used to cling to my skirt at the grocery store, cry for hours when her goldfish died. She was always smart, top of her class. Earned a scholarship to Emory University. I was so proud I could burst. She married a man named Brian, a real estate agent from Atlanta. Polish-driven, charming like a midday radio host. They have 2 children now, Alex and Molly. I love them more than I know how to express. Every summer they'd stay with me. We baked cookies, built pillow forts, caught fireflies, just like I used to with Claire. But over time Claire changed. She got busy, distant, still polite but cold. Our phone calls turned into short texts, our visits became awkward dinners, and recently her tone shifted. Every conversation felt like a negotiation. That morning, her voice tense, she called and said, Mom, we found the perfect house. But we're short on the down payment. Could you maybe sell your wedding necklace? I froze. Not because of what she asked, but because of how easily she asked it. Like I was holding onto a trinket I should have let go of years ago. Like the love woven into every pearl didn't matter. When I hesitated, she added, I mean, you don't wear it. It just sits in a box, right? It wasn't cruel exactly, but it was transactional. That word clung to me. Transactional. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, had begun to see me not as a mother but as a resource, a safety net, a last resort. What she didn't know was, I'd paid off this house years ago. I owed nothing. I lived frugally, saved carefully, and never told Claire how much I had. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't want to be seen as walking capital. And now I wasn't sure she saw anything else. That evening, I stood by the window with the jewelry box in my hand. The pearls caught the light, shimmering just as they had when Harold first placed them around my neck. I closed the box gently and slid it back into the drawer. That's when I made my decision. I wouldn't sell my memories. I would sell something else. Something bigger. Something far more meaningful. Something Claire would never see coming. And through that choice, I would reclaim the pieces of myself I had quietly surrendered for years, just to keep the peace, just to be the good mother. But I no longer wanted to be the good mother. I wanted to be me. Eleanor Jennings, 68 years old, a woman who had once loved, once sacrificed, once stayed silent. But not anymore. It was still early, but I had been up for hours. The savannah sky was gray and cool. I stood in my kitchen, gently stirring a pot of oatmeal, the phone pressed between my shoulder and cheek. Claire's voice came through the line, sharp, rushed, and with no time for pleasantries. "Mom, have you thought about it? About the necklace?" Her tone was clipped, almost impatient. I took a deep breath. "I have, Claire. But that necklace, it means a lot to me." There was a pause, then a sigh, long and heavy, like she was speaking to someone who just couldn't understand reason. "Mom," she continued, "this is our best shot. The house in Buckhead is listed for an incredible price. If we don't act now, we'll lose it. We're only short 50 grand. You don't even have to give us cash. Just sell the necklace. That's not selfish, is it?" Her voice lifted slightly at the end, like she was trying to guilt me into saying yes. I hesitated, only for a second, but to her that second was an opening. "We've done a lot for you," Claire pushed. "Brian and I have taken you on trips, let the kids stay with you every summer. You wouldn't be alone anymore. We can set you up in the guest room." I froze. The guest room? Yeah, upstairs. Once we move in, it makes sense, right? You don't need to live alone in that big house anymore. I felt the blood in my body go cold. Suddenly, the picture became painfully clear. Claire didn't just want the necklace. She wanted the money, the control, and my independence, traded for a small corner of her new life. A corner labeled "Gist." I set the spoon down, wiped my hands on my apron, and steadied my voice. "Claire, do you hear what you're saying?" She sounded confused. "What do you mean?" I said slowly, each word sharp and deliberate. "You're asking me to sell something priceless. For you. So that I can sleep in a guest room. Like a stranger." "Oh, come on, Mom. Don't be dramatic," she snapped. "You're twisting my words." But I wasn't twisting anything. For the first time, I was hearing them clearly. Claire wasn't asking for help. She was making a demand. As if I owed her. As if my purpose was to bankroll her life, her dreams, her new beginning. When she was little, Claire used to help me garden. We'd plant tomatoes, bell peppers, and laugh when squirrels stole our strawberries. One day, dirt on her cheeks, she looked up at me and said, "I want to live with you forever, Mommy." Now, she wanted me in the guest room, and called it love. I ended the call, not angry, not in tears. I just sat down to breakfast quietly. No TV, no birdsong out back, just the hum of the fridge and the sound of my own breathing. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was hurt. The kind of hurt that doesn't yell, it whispers. It settles deep in your chest and turns the world cold. That afternoon, I went up to my room, opened the cedar chest at the foot of the bed. Inside were old photos, Harold's medals, Claire's childhood blanket. And beneath a perfectly folded flag was the small purple velvet box, the wedding necklace. I opened it. The pearls still shimmered. Silent, proud, I closed it gently, returned it to its place. Later that evening, Brian called. I didn't expect that. He was unusually sweet, practically buttering me up. He said how grateful they were, how they'd always known I'd come through for the family. Then he said something that made my spine go cold. "We'll take care of you, Eleanor. You won't have to worry about a thing. We're family." It didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a contract. That night I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the old magnolia tree. I thought about Harold. What would he say? I pictured him standing with arms folded, shaking his head. "Ellie, don't trade your dignity for a thank you in a spare room." I smiled at the thought. Just for a moment. The next morning, Claire sent a text. "Did you get the appraisal yet? We really need to move forward." No "Hi, Mom." No "How are you?" Just an assignment. Like I was her assistant, her bank, her problem solver. That was when everything crystallized. She didn't see me. Not as a woman, not as her mother, not as the person who raised her with love. Just a talking vault. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to a quiet cafe downtown, ordered a hot tea, and opened my notebook. I began to write, not a list of what I would give them, but of what I still had for myself. The house paid off. A modest pension, some savings, the old car Harold left me still running, the necklace, and my dignity. And I realized I still had so much. That night I made a decision. I would sell the house, not to hand over the money, but to buy my freedom. I wouldn't tell Claire. Not yet. Not until the papers were signed. Not until every box was sealed. Not until every goodbye was whispered in my own time. Because this time I wasn't giving away my life. I was taking it back. Even though Eleanor had agreed to stay at Claire's house temporarily, while waiting for her new condo to be ready, deep down she always knew this wasn't a beginning. It was just a stopover. The house Claire and Brian had just bought wasn't paid for by them. Not a single cent. The $50,000 Claire had once suggested they get from Eleanor's wedding necklace. Eleanor hadn't given it. She hadn't sold the necklace. Instead, she quietly sold something far more valuable, the home she and Harold had built a life in. She did everything quietly. The deal was signed, the paperwork stamped. Movers came while Claire was at work. Eleanor kept only what she truly needed. The rest, Harold's handmade chairs, the old grandfather clock, her collection of cookbooks, was donated to charity. When Claire found out, her first reaction wasn't grief or even the anger Eleanor had braced for. "Why did you sell it without telling me?" Claire asked, confusion clouding her face. "We would have wanted to help you choose your next place." Eleanor smiled gently. "I already knew where I was going, sweetheart." Claire didn't ask again. For the following weeks, Eleanor stayed in Claire's home. Just until her condo was ready, she reminded them the guest room was tidy, neat, but her name was on no door. There were no traces of her, no context. At first it seemed manageable, but then the signs began to show, small enough to miss, unless you paid attention. "You're lucky we let you stay," Claire would joke, half smiling, eyes glued to her phone, usually at breakfast, or when Eleanor offered to cook. Each word landed light as lint but stuck like cobwebs in the air, clinging, lingering. "Let me stay." In a house paid for with the savings of a lifetime. One evening at dinner, Brian dropped a comment that made Eleanor freeze halfway through her bite. "Guess your generation wasn't big on planning for the future," he said, casually slicing into his steak. Claire giggled. "Brian," he shrugged, "just saying. We've got retirement accounts, life insurance, college funds for the kids. We're not planning to be a burden." Eleanor said nothing. She looked down at the meal, every bite prepared by her hands. She'd shopped for it, cooked it, washed up after, not because she was asked, but because it had become expected. At first, she told herself it was manners. Helping, sharing, but day by day the balance shifted. She became the babysitter when Claire needed a mental health day, the school drop-off ride, the errand runner, the dinner preparer. No one asked, "Are you tired?" No one thanked her. One afternoon, while folding laundry in the hallway, Eleanor paused mid-sock. She stood there, holding a pair of Claire's leggings, and thought, when was the last time someone said thank you? Not once, not a gesture. She wasn't mom anymore, she was the help. But Eleanor wasn't fragile. She had seen Harold through cancer, held her family together through winters of grief. She noticed things. She remembered. Like how the office door, once open, was now always locked. Or how Claire introduced her to neighbors as, "My mom, she's staying with us for a bit," like she was a piece of temporary furniture. Even the children, Alex and Molly, had learned the new script. No greetings, tossed their coats toward her like she was a rat. Whispers of, "Grandma's annoying," when they thought she couldn't hear. It didn't hurt because of the children, it hurt because Claire allowed it. One night, after cleaning the kitchen alone, Eleanor stood at the sink, washing a dish that was already clean. Moonlight spilled through the window, silver on the tile. She whispered, to no one but herself, "This isn't home. This isn't love." She had sold her house, yes, but she hadn't sold herself. Her new condo would be ready in a few weeks. Claire didn't know the address. Neither did Brian, and that was intentional. Because Eleanor didn't plan on forwarding it. She was planning a departure, quiet but deliberate. That morning, she left a note beside Claire's favorite coffee mug. "Thank you for letting me stay. But I miss being seen." She picked up her small suitcase, the velvet box that held her wedding necklace, and walked out without a word. Freedom doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it looks like a woman walking out the door, head high, heart breaking, toward something stronger than pain, something like peace. The phone call took less than 10 minutes, but it changed the course of Eleanor Jennings's life. "I want everything done quietly," she told the real estate agent. "No signs, no announcements, just get it done." The woman on the other end, Ms. Barrett, understood immediately. She had worked with many elderly clients before, most of them clinging to their homes like the last thread tethering them to the world. But Eleanor was different. Her voice was steady, clear, decisive. Within 3 weeks, the house in Savannah was sold. The entire process was so discreet Claire had no idea. By the time she realized something was off, Eleanor was already gone. Not to a nursing home, not to some spare room in a relative's house, but to Charleston, South Carolina, a small, sunlit apartment near the Battery, 2 blocks from a bookstore, 3 from the ocean. It wasn't fancy, but it breathed freedom. It felt like a beginning. There were no family portraits lining the hallways, no traces of past arguments or silent sacrifices, Just light stillness and a slower pace, exactly how Eleanor had always wished to live. She didn't tell Claire where she was going, not to punish her, but because, for the first time in decades, she didn't have to explain. There was no one to ask permission from. No dinners to cook when she wasn't hungry. No dishwasher beeping. No endless sighs triggered by yet another request. There was just her. The first mornings felt strange. She still poured 2 cups of coffee out of habit, then smiled softly and poured one back. She still woke up early, half expecting the sound of footsteps or her grandson's backpack thumping against the wall. But there was only the rustle of trees beyond the balcony. Eleanor began to walk, not just around the apartment complex but into the city, along the harbor, to the market, to small shops tucked into Charleston's quiet corners, including one little watercolor studio nestled between a cafe and a bike repair shop. That place changed everything. One morning, after leaving the bookstore, she noticed an easel outside with a watercolor of a marsh at sunrise. Soft greens, blushing pinks, strokes so light they felt like breath. A sign hung by the door. Etiolars glasis bralags b guionair squils. Eleanor paused. She hadn't held a brush since high school, before Harold enlisted, before life became diapers, bills, tuition, and 1,000 postponed dreams labeled someday. But someday had arrived. She signed up for Tuesday and Thursday classes. The first session was a mess. Her hands trembled, the colors blood. The garden she tried to paint looked more like an abstract onion. But she laughed, a deep laugh, from the belly. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she did something just because she wanted to. The instructor, Leela, a woman in her 50s with paint-stained fingers and a raspy voice, walked by and said, "Don't worry about the flowers, Eleanor. Just paint what it feels like." So she did. She painted what it felt like to sit alone on a balcony and not feel lonely. She painted the ache of a house that held too many birthdays and not enough tenderness. She painted the color of silence, pale blue with sharp edges. Week by week, her strokes steadied. She used part of the money from the house to buy her own brushes, good watercolor paper, a foldable easel. One day she painted the same marsh from the studio sign, and this time, it wasn't half bad. Leela looked at it, then smiled. "Looks like peace." Eleanor nodded. "That's what I was going for." Meanwhile, Claire had started leaving messages. At first, they were soft. "Mom, when are you coming to visit?" Then came the urgency. "I noticed the house sold. Where are you? Are you safe?" And eventually, the tone Eleanor knew too well. "Mom, we need to talk. Childcare's expensive. Can we please figure something out?" But Eleanor didn't reply. Not because she was angry, but because she was protecting herself. She didn't want to rush forgiveness. She didn't want to return to being the built-in babysitter, the woman who always showed up when others needed her. Not until she fully remembered who she was, without the apron, without the bills, without the expectations. In Charleston, she wasn't Mom. She wasn't Grandma. She wasn't the widow Jennings. She was Eleanor, the woman who painted awkward wildflowers and quiet mornings. The woman who read mystery novels while her tea steeped and slept when she pleased, not when the dishwasher cycle ended. She was a story being rewritten, and this time, she held the pen. Claire returned home late one afternoon after a 3-day business trip in Atlanta. The moment she turned off the ignition, she let out a long sigh of relief. In her mind, she pictured the familiar scenes, the rich aroma of coffee lingering in the kitchen, the slow, gentle footsteps of her mother moving around the house, or perhaps the quiet silhouette of Eleanor hunched over the couch, knitting scarves as usual. But the house was oddly silent. No coffee smell, no soft AM radio from the living room, and her mother's worn-out shoes, always lined up neatly by the front door, were gone. Claire stepped into the kitchen, a tightness creeping into her chest like a rope being pulled taut. On the table, where her mother usually kept a small vase of flowers and a warm cup of tea, there was only an envelope, pale yellow paper, blue ink, still her mother's handwriting, round and gentle. But this time it felt sharper, firmer, like each stroke had been carved from a long-held resolve. "You asked me for my memories, I kept them. You asked me for my future, I took it back." Claire turned the envelope over with trembling hands. Inside just a few lines, "I've left. The house has been sold. The money is mine. The will has been updated. I hope you find the life you're chasing. I'm doing the same." No blame, no anger, but sharper than any accusation. Claire froze. Her legs gave way as she sank into the nearest chair. She read the letter over and over, hoping to find a joke, a scribbled P.S. "Just kidding," like her mother used to write when things got tense. But there was none. Her mother had really gone, and the only thing she left behind was silence. The house, the one Claire thought of as home, was no longer theirs. In a panic, she called the family attorney. The voice on the other end was calm, firm. "Mrs. Eleanor completed all legal transactions 3 weeks ago. Title transfer, deed, and the revised will have all been notarized. Claire stood paralyzed. No warning, no hint, no suggestion. Her mother had done the unthinkable. Quietly and with complete conviction, she called. No one answered. She texted, "Mom, I don't understand. Please call me." Only silence replied. Claire rushed to the guest room, her mother's room. Everything was gone. The closet was empty. The wooden box of old love letters from her late father vanished. Her mother's favorite cardigan, nowhere to be found. Even the silver wedding necklace, something Eleanor had kept close to her skin for decades, was no longer there. Eleanor hadn't just moved out. She had taken everything, her memories, her autonomy, her right to choose. Claire sat at the edge of the bed, stunned. On the bookshelf, one photo remained. Claire at 8 years old, standing between her parents, her mother's gentle hand resting on her shoulder, wearing that quiet smile that once meant safety. But the woman in the photo, she was no longer the quiet, self-sacrificing mother. She had become a woman who knew how to cut emotional chains. In Charleston, Eleanor set down a warm cup of tea beside her sketchbook. Today's painting was of a nameless beach, soft light, silver-tipped waves, not a soul in sight. She smiled as the breeze played with her hair. Beside her, the stray cat she had adopted slept curled into itself, perfectly content. Her phone remained on silent. Last night she skimmed a few messages. Claire had sent dozens. First confusion, then anger, then pleading. "Mom, how could you do this? Where are you? We're family. Please, at least tell me why." But Eleanor didn't reply. She didn't need to justify her freedom. All her life, she had lived to preserve what others called stability. But now she kept only what truly held value. She sighed, her heart no longer heavy, no longer feeling the need to prove she was a good mother, no longer hiding behind the curtain, no longer sacrificing in silence. She was living, truly living, no one telling her what to do, no one expecting her to fill a role, no one placing obligations at her feet. And though her heart still ached from time to time, she knew this decision was right. For the first time in decades, Eleanor was no longer living to be someone else's anchor. She was living for herself. It was a cloudy Thursday morning in Charleston. The sky was so gray, it made the sea appear more still, more contemplative than usual. Eleanor sat quietly in her small apartment, sipping her second cup of chamomile tea, eyes following the soft breeze as it played with the sheer white curtains. Nothing seemed out of place in that moment, except for the unshakable feeling inside her. Then the doorbell rang. A soft sound, but one that rippled through the stillness like a stone tossed into a pond. Eleanor knew. She didn't need to guess. Somehow, a mother's heart always knows. She opened the door, and there was Claire. Hair messy, eyes swollen, her face hollow like someone who had driven through the night without a minute of rest. They stood in silence. No greeting, just the distant cries of seagulls and the gentle crash of waves below the balcony. "You sold the house," Claire said first, her voice raw, strained. Eleanor nodded. "Wes. And you left without telling me. You just walked away like I didn't matter." Eleanor's gaze was steady, calm but full of weight. "You once told me I was lucky you let me stay." Claire flinched, as if struck. Her mouth opened to argue, but no words came. They sat on the balcony, 2 steaming cups of tea between them, and miles of silence in between. Claire cried, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a slow, steady stream that wouldn't stop. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered, voice as fragile as the wind. Eleanor gently placed her cup down. Her voice was still soft but no longer weak. "No one means to hurt anyone. But that doesn't stop the bleeding." Claire wiped her tears. "It was too much. Jeremy lost his job. We didn't know where to turn. I thought if we had the house, something stable, things would get easier. I thought you'd understand." Eleanor tilted her head, sadness flickering in her eyes. "Understand what? That a lifetime of memories could be negotiated. That my dignity was worth a spare bedroom." Claire lowered her head. "I just wanted your help." "No. You wanted my compliance, and there's a difference." Silence fell again. Only the wind and waves continued speaking, washing away what words could not. Then Eleanor opened the drawer beside her chair and pulled out a cream-colored envelope, neatly bordered in gray. She handed it to Claire. "This is a copy of the new will. I updated it weeks ago. You're no longer listed as a beneficiary." Claire stared at the envelope like it held a verdict. "You removed me completely." Eleanor nodded, unwavering. "But not from my life, only from my estate." Claire opened the letter with trembling hands. On the last page, beneath Eleanor's signature, was a handwritten note, still in the same round script. Only now it carried a different strength. "My door isn't locked, but I won't open it for guilt." Claire read it 3 times. Not because she didn't understand, but because she hoped its meaning would change with repetition. She looked up, eyes glistening. "So what are we now?" Eleanor leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "Now I keep living." and you must decide who you want to become. Not for an appearances, but for yourself. Claire stood, regaining a small piece of composure. She hesitated, then asked quietly, "Can I visit you sometimes? Maybe we can start over." Eleanor gave a slow smile, tired but not unkind. "This door will always be open, but only if you knock with honesty, not expectation." Claire turned and walked away. Her figure slowly disappeared down the palm-lined street, a small silhouette in a city that didn't yet know her name. Eleanor watched her go, her heart not entirely light, but clearer than it had been in years. It wasn't forgiveness, it was understanding, and that was enough to let go. She took a sip of tea, closed her eyes, and breathed in the salty wind from the ocean. A life finally lived for herself. Late Friday afternoon, the Charleston sky turned into a wash of soft orange and slate gray, like a watercolor blurred by time. The sea breeze kissed Eleanor's face, carrying the salt of the ocean through the open balcony doors. She was watering her deep purple lavender pots, each motion slow, deliberate, as if tending not just to plants but to memories she'd chosen to keep alive. These were the rare moments when she felt truly anchored, not pulled back by the past, nor chased by the future. The landline rang, slicing through the stillness. The concierge's voice crackled through the speaker. "Mrs. Jennings, a woman named Claire Jennings, is downstairs. She says she's your daughter." Eleanor froze, her grip tightening ever so slightly around the watering can. She knew this day would come, not by logic but by a quiet, mother's intuition that never really sleeps. She set the can down, took a deep breath and said, "Send her up." When the door opened, Claire looked like someone who had just stepped out of a storm. Her face pale, hair unkempt, eyes swollen from lack of sleep. She paused in the doorway, taking in the apartment. Everything was simple, thoughtfully arranged, nothing excessive, a space with soul, but no trace of Claire. No family photos, no keepsakes, no emotional anchors. Everything here belonged to Eleanor and Eleanor alone. Claire said softly, then paused as her eyes met her mother's. Eleanor's gaze was calm, not cold, not bitter, but no longer eager, no longer soft. She invited Claire inside. They sat on the small couch. 2 cups of ginger tea steamed quietly between them, filling the room with warmth neither of them touched. Claire inhaled deeply, as if summoning courage from somewhere deep inside. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. "I was just under so much pressure. The bills, the mortgage, everything piled up. I thought if you could just help us a little, things would be okay." Eleanor cut in gently, her voice quiet but unmistakable. "No one ever means to hurt. But pain doesn't ask for permission." Claire lowered her head, her shoulders trembling, not with anger, but with shame. For the first time, she had no excuse, no claim to unconditional forgiveness. "I thought you'd always be there," Claire whispered. "I thought you'd understand." "I do," Eleanor replied, her eyes deep with something heavier than sadness. "That's why I left. Staying would have meant erasing myself." She stood and walked to a small cabinet by the window. From it, she took out a cream-colored envelope and handed it to Claire. "This is a copy of the new will. I thought you should see it." Claire took it with trembling hands. She opened it, skimming the clauses, her eyes finally resting on a handwritten note. Her mother's writing, still round and neat, but firmer now, more resolute. "My door isn't locked, but I won't open it for guilt." Claire froze. Tears dropped silently onto the envelope. Eleanor remained seated, composed. She didn't reach out, didn't offer comforting words. Not because the love was gone, but because some truths must be learned in solitude, not soothed away. "I'm sorry," Claire whispered, almost like a confession. "I truly am." Eleanor looked at her daughter. The same child she had once rocked through Savannah winters, the one she had taught to ride a bike, whose scraped knees she had kissed. Now a tired woman sitting before her, eyes sunken, carrying the weight of consequences she could no longer deny. "Claire," Eleanor said softly, "I hope someday you understand that love isn't about asking, it's about seeing, and you didn't see me, not for a very long time." Claire didn't argue. She nodded slowly, as if finally hearing something that had always been there. "Can I come visit you?" she asked, her voice tentative. "Can we start again?" Eleanor smiled, not with triumph, but with the steady peace of someone who had found her compass again. "Let time decide. But if you come back, come with sincerity. Not because of blood, not because of expectation, just because you truly want to see me." Claire stood. No hugs, no rush. She walked out quietly, the same way she had come. Outside, the last light of the day spilled across the sidewalk, casting her silhouette in soft gold, equal parts remorse and hope. Eleanor stepped out onto the balcony, her hand brushing the head of the little stray cat curled up beside her lavender. There were no slammed doors, no dramatic goodbyes, no loud reunion, only one simple truth she had chosen herself, and from now on anyone who wished to enter her life would have to come with presence, with intention, not by default. not by blood, but because they saw her, truly saw her. It was a late Friday afternoon in Charleston. The sky above the coast painted itself in blurred shades of orange and slate gray, like an oil painting left out in the rain. The ocean breeze rolled in, cool and salty, weaving its way through the open balcony doors and brushing gently against Eleanor's cheeks. She was tending to her lavender pots, deep purple and fragrant, watering them slowly, almost ceremoniously. Her hands moved with the same patience and grace that had come to define her quiet rituals. These were her moments, unclaimed by the past, unburdened by the future. Only the present mattered now, and it belonged to her. The landline rang, breaking the silence. She paused. The voice from the front desk was calm. "Mrs. Jennings, there's a young woman downstairs, Claire Jennings. She says she's your daughter." Eleanor exhaled, steadying herself. Somewhere deep down she had always known this day would come. Not through reason, but through that quiet, ever-watching sense that lives in a mother's chest. "Send her up," she said softly. When the door opened, Claire looked like someone who had just survived a storm. Her face was tired, her eyes puffy, hair messy from hours on the road. She stood at the threshold, eyes scanning the apartment, simple, peaceful, entirely unfamiliar. No family photos, no heirlooms, no sign she had ever been a part of this place. Everything in here was Eleanor's, and only Eleanor's. "Mom," Claire murmured, her voice trembling as it collided with Eleanor's gaze. Not cold, not angry, but no longer eager to reach across. Eleanor invited her in. They sat. 2 cups of peach tea sat untouched on the coffee table. The room filled with the gentle scent of ginger and something unsaid. "I didn't mean to hurt you," Claire whispered. "I was just under so much pressure. The costs, the kids, Jeremy losing his job. I thought if you helped a little, we'd make it through." Eleanor stopped her, gently, but with the strength of someone who had finally stopped softening herself for the comfort of others. "No one sets out to hurt people, Claire, but that doesn't make the wounds disappear." Claire's shoulders fell. For the first time in a long while, she had nothing left to say in her own defense. No automatic script, no sense of entitlement. "I thought you'd always be there," she said quietly. "I just assumed you'd understand." "I do understand," Eleanor said. "Which is why I left. Staying would have meant erasing who I was." She stood and crossed the room, returning with a cream envelope. "This is a copy of my new will. I thought you should have it." Claire took it with shaky hands. She read in silence until her eyes landed on the last page, on a single handwritten line, elegant but firm. "My door isn't locked. But I won't open it for guilt." Claire broke down, not loudly but completely, the kind of tears that came from realizing something had already shifted long ago. Eleanor didn't reach out. She didn't offer comfort. Not because she no longer loved, but because she finally loved herself enough not to rescue others from the truth. "I'm sorry," Claire whispered, raw and real. "I truly am." Eleanor looked at the woman across from her, not the little girl she once rocked to sleep, but a grown woman finally meeting her own reflection. "I hope you'll come to understand one day," she said softly, "that love doesn't come from asking. It comes from seeing. And you didn't see me, not for a long time." Claire nodded. "Can I still visit you? Maybe we can start again." Eleanor smiled, not out of victory but of arrival, like someone who had been wandering in the dark for years and finally found her way home. "We'll let time decide. But if you come back, Claire, come not because you're my daughter, come because you truly want to see me." Claire stood, composed herself, and left. No hug, no promises. Just a woman walking back into the Charleston dusk, her silhouette touched by fading sunlight, somewhere between remorse and hope. Eleanor stepped out onto her balcony, the little cat curled at her feet. There was no slamming door, no grand reconciliation, only one simple truth: she had chosen herself, and from now on, anyone wishing to walk into her life would have to walk in with sincerity. Not out of obligation, not out of blood, but out of presence, out of truly seeing her. It was an early winter morning in Charleston, the kind of sunlight that barely kissed the rooftops, thin as a veil of silk. Eleanor was steeping her tea when she heard a soft knock on the hallway door. The receptionist smiled gently and handed her a pale beige envelope. Not from the bank, not a flyer, a handwritten letter, rare, and that alone made her pause. She recognized the script immediately, slanted slightly to the right. Claire's handwriting. Eleanor opened it slowly, as though rushing might tear something delicate yet unsaid. "Mom, I know I've made many mistakes, but if you're willing, your granddaughter, her name is Lily, was born last week. I'd be grateful if you'd come meet her. Just once. No pressure, Claire. No elaborate excuses. No promises of change. No overt apologies." But between the lines, in the pauses and white spaces, Eleanor sensed something rare: sincerity. Not loud remorse but a quiet hopefulness. She laid the letter down and sat in silence for a long time. Then she reached into the bottom drawer of her old wooden cabinet. Beneath a folded silk cloth was a pale lavender velvet box, the one that held her silver wedding necklace. It had never been sold, even when she was asked. It wasn't just a token of a love now gone, it was a symbol of the value she'd chosen to preserve, when the world around her said it was time to let it go. 3 days later, Eleanor stood before a front door in a quiet suburban neighborhood on the edge of Atlanta. Her hands were cold. Her heart was heavy, not with anger but with uncertainty. She didn't know if she was stepping into reconciliation or one last goodbye. Claire opened the door. Her eyes were shadowed, her face tired, but something flickered behind the exhaustion, a cautious hope, a nervous longing. Mom, Eleanor nodded. Hello, dear. And hello, granddaughter. No embrace, no tears like in the movies, just two women, one who had weathered storms, the other still lost in the winds, seeing each other perhaps truly for the first time. The house was quiet. In a bassinet near the couch, a tiny baby slept soundly. Lily, her skin soft as a petal, her tiny hand curled as if holding the whole world in a dream. Eleanor stepped closer, each movement reverent, like entering sacred ground. She didn't speak. She simply let her heart swell with something wordless and warm enough to blur her vision. May I hold her? She whispered. Claire nodded. Of course. Eleanor bent down and cradled the baby. She was so light, yet so full, like holding a beginning, a life untouched by burden, by expectations, by the weight of anyone else's past. From her coat pocket, Eleanor took out a small lavender box. She opened it, the silver necklace catching the soft light of the living room lamp. A piece once guarded like a treasure, once requested to be sold, once used to measure worth. Now, it was none of those things. Now, it was a whisper passed between generations that worth is not inherited, it is earned, in kindness, in gratitude, in choices made from love, not debt. Eleanor placed the necklace into Lily's tiny hand. She didn't fasten it, she didn't explain, she simply laid it there, like planting a seed. Claire said nothing. Her eyes shimmered full but still. She didn't ask why her mother had come. She didn't apologize again. There were no debts left. Eleanor had chosen forgiveness, but not repetition. When she stepped out of the house, the afternoon light was folding gently over Atlanta rooftops. She didn't look back. She didn't need to know whether she'd return, because she understood. Today wasn't an extension of the past, it was a door, an opening, a chance to truly see each other, not through roles or regrets, but through the quiet bravery of beginning small, a glance, an invitation, a necklace placed in a baby's palm, not out of duty, but out of hope. That night, on her blog Living Forward, Eleanor typed with quiet resolve, I didn't go back, I moved forward, into a space where grace still lives. Not for who someone used to be, but for who they might still become, if we dare to let them. She looked up at the sky, first signs of winter in the air, and she smiled. Because every road to healing begins with a door slightly open, and a hand reaching out, not demanding, just inviting. It was a gentle Saturday morning. The early sunlight quietly pulled apart the clouds, streaming softly through the glass windows of the Charleston Community Center. Eleanor stepped into the main hall with a gait that was both steady and unsure. A small chalkboard sign near the entrance read in slanted white script, Aging with Dignity, Stories of Strength and Starting Over. As the keynote speaker, Eleanor should have come prepared, with folded notes, neatly lined bullet points, practiced phrasing. But today she brought only herself, no papers, no outline, because she knew what needed to be said had already been written by her own life. Crease by crease, crack by crack, decision by decision. The room was modest, just a few rows of folding chairs, but the women seated there, about 20 of them, all over 60, carried a silence Eleanor recognized instantly. Eyes that had grown tired of shining, hands calloused from decades of care, smiles pressed into place, more habit than joy. When her name was called, Eleanor stepped up to the small wooden podium. There was no music, no spotlight, just a single microphone, and a heart that had weathered so many storms. It now stood steady enough to speak. She began with a short sentence, simple, almost deceptively so. I used to think being a good mother meant learning how to disappear. The room fell still. Heads that had been bowed now began to lift, slowly, cautiously, as if their hearts, too, were reaching for something long buried. Eleanor told her story, not with drama, not with blame, but with a voice as soft as morning light, yet strong enough to reach the places we all try to hide. She spoke of her old house in Savannah, once filled with footsteps of a Navy husband who passed too quickly from a cruel illness, before he could even say goodbye. She spoke of dinners where her daughter slowly began to see her as part of the background, necessary, but no longer meaningful. She spoke of the silver wedding necklace, a gift from her husband, once requested to be sold for a down payment on her daughter's dream home. She never sold it. But neither did she use it to measure love or gratitude. Eleanor paused, then said, one day, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Not because she had aged, but because she had vanished from her own life. She spoke of the day she sold the house, quietly, no fanfare, no tears, just resolve, the kind that comes not from anger, but from finally choosing yourself after years of choosing everyone else. She spoke of Charleston, of her small apartment, her painting class, the stray cat she took in, and of Walter, a man with sawdust on his sleeves and a gaze that didn't try to fix, just listen. She spoke of the last time she saw Claire, not to shame her, but to speak a truth, that forgiveness had been given, but repetition would not, that the necklace had been passed down, not to her daughter, but to her granddaughter, as a seed for a future untethered from old wounds. Eleanor closed with this: forgiveness isn't weakness, but forgetting who you are, just to be accepted, might be. The room held its breath, but it wasn't empty silence, it was full of reflection, of resonance, of something breaking open and beginning to breathe again. An elderly woman stood, voice trembling. I haven't spoken to my son in 3 years, but listening to you, maybe I need to learn how to speak to myself first. Another, her eyes brighter than before, whispered, I always thought I was too old to start again. Maybe I've just been too scared. Eleanor didn't respond. She only smiled, stepped down and sat among them. No longer the speaker, just a fellow traveler. That afternoon, an email landed in her inbox from the organizers. Several attendees asked if you would consider leading a monthly circle. They said your story made them feel not alone. Eleanor read the message, sat in quiet thought, then gently typed. On her blog Living Forward Notes from a Second Life, she wrote, there's a kind of courage that lives quietly after 60. It doesn't shout. It isn't what the world usually praises, but it's the kind that can rebuild a life with nothing more than one honest word, spoken at the right time. Outside the window, the sun was beginning to lean westward toward the sea. Eleanor looked at her reflection in the glass, not lost anymore, because at last she had stepped onto the stage of her own life, not to be applauded but to be seen, and to say aloud what she had once forgotten. That life still has space for us, even when we've convinced ourselves it doesn't. Perhaps, at some point in life, we all sit down, not to blame anyone, not to scream at things we can't change, but to look inward. To ask, where does my worth truly lie? When did I start living so much for others that I forgot to live for myself? The story of Eleanor Jennings isn't just about a mother who dared to walk away from the home she once built with her whole heart. It's a quiet but sharp awakening, about a woman choosing to be reborn in what others might call the final chapters of her life. For decades, Eleanor lived by everyone else's definitions. She was the devoted wife of a Navy man, the mother of an ambitious daughter, the woman who shelved her hobbies, her desires, even her voice, just to keep things stable for the family. She stayed silent when she was overlooked. She endured being treated as a burden. She gave without ever asking for a thank you. But Eleanor didn't choose revenge. She didn't lash out in rage or sorrow. She simply stopped. She stopped giving when love became a convenience taken for granted. She stopped sacrificing as if it were the default setting for women. She stopped being a mother in a way that erased her own right to feel, to need, to be. And in that moment of pause, Eleanor found freedom. Not the kind that needs approval. Not the kind that gets applause. But the kind that is born quietly, within. When you lay down the weight of being accepted and choose to walk forward on your own. Being a parent doesn't mean being a servant. There is no silent contract that demands we trade our old age for our children's convenience. There is no moral rule that says love must come with surrender. And motherhood, it was never meant to be something you mortgage your dignity for. Eleanor understood this, and she chose to leave not in bitterness, but in clarity, because she knew she had given enough, and it was time to receive not from others, but from herself. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Eleanor still offered a chance, a meeting, a reopened door, but not to continue the old cycle. She didn't erase the past. She just refused to let it dictate the future. By placing the wedding necklace into the hands of her granddaughter, not her daughter, she sent a quiet message that love is not passed down by blood. It's passed through every small act, through listening, through unspoken compassion, through a gaze that says, I see you. I'm here. No one is born with value. Value is built, act by act, moment by moment, through kindness. Real love should never be traded for the gemstones of the past, because no matter how precious they are, those gems can't buy respect. They can't buy back the silent dinners. They can't erase the moment a mother was made to feel like a guest in the home she paid for, with a lifetime. In the end, Eleanor didn't choose a grand house with spiral staircases and a fireplace. She chose a small apartment, where morning light filtered through white curtains, where a lavender plant bloomed quietly on the balcony, where a once stray cat now sleeps in her lap. a place where no one calls her Mum or Grandma out of obligation but simply Eleanor. She didn't live to be remembered, she lived to be herself. And if you listening to this have ever felt forgotten in your own family, have ever felt like you had to ask permission just to breathe, then let this remind you you are not alone. You are not selfish for asking, where am I in this story? You deserve to be heard. You deserve a life that doesn't ask for permission to begin again. And if one day you want to tell your story, whether you are a mother, a father, a daughter, a son, or simply someone learning to love yourself again, know this: we will read it. We will remember. And if you'd like, we will help you tell it in a voice the world won't ignore. So the world will know you existed, you were strong, and you chose yourself. If you feel this journey is worth sharing, please subscribe to this channel so we can continue bringing you more stories like Eleanor's stories of strength, of depth, of healing. For anyone still walking through the dark, trying to find their way back to the light, thank you for listening, and thank you for still being here.